Great. So, one of the first things that is germane to the study of environment is understanding what pollution is, where it comes from, and why we should care. First thing is pollution. So, pollution can be defined as the presence of any sort of substance in the environment that is dangerous or inconvenient for humans. Now, a lot of it comes from natural sources. You can think of things like forest fires, volcanic eruptions, things like that. But human activity adds even more contaminants, probably, than any natural source. And industrial activity, in particular, is dangerous to human health, but it also destroys natural ecology. Now, it's also important to note that pollution, as I mentioned, is harmful to human health, but it can also reduce the overall life expectancy of individuals living in a polluted or contaminated area. What's even more unfortunate is that disproportionately we see that lower income people and in lower income or developing countries are particularly impacted by environmental pollution. A lot of things that we take for granted here in Western countries, like safe water and sanitation, we take it for granted that there's going to be very little indoor air pollution. We also think that urban air pollution is something that's maybe not something that you would have to worry about. We're not particularly concerned about lead exposure, those kinds of things. Those are particularly dangerous to individuals in lower income areas and in lower income countries. So while the environment may not have as direct impact on the wealthy people and wealthier countries, it certainly does impact the poor disproportionately, which is unfortunate. So one of the first things you want to look at is the biosphere. Biosphere is germane to the study of the environment because basically that is what we would understand as the environment. It's that itty-bitty little layer on top of the Earth's surface that supports life. Someone told me one time that if you take a pool ball and you look at that as a representation of the Earth, and you blow on it until it condenses on there, that thin layer of condensation is kind of a representation of the biosphere, if you want to use kind of proportion. So if the Earth were the size of a pool ball, the biosphere would be that little layer of condensation on top. And inside the biosphere, there's multiple ecosystems. And an ecosystem is that animated realm where there are plants, animals, and microorganisms living in this kind of area of a non-living environment. And the biosphere hosts a variety of ecosystems. Now, ecosystems provide a lot of services that support human well-being. We call these ecosystem services. So, ecosystem services are those those items in the natural ecosystem that create food or fiber, they regulate climate, the purity of water, soil, the amount of nutrients in the soil, any other form of natural capital. So maybe an example would be, for example, forests provide wood, but then they also purify the air. That's a natural ecosystem service. And ecosystem services are strained by accelerating economic and industrial activity. Now, one of the things that we should focus on with the environment is what we call sustainable development, so that we don't harm our ecosystem services. Sustainable development means non-polluting economic growth that raises the standards of living without depleting net resources of Earth. So basically you try to live in balance with what ecosystem services can provide with your own development. You're not borrowing from the ecosystem in such a way that it cannot be replenished. And there is evidence that environmental quality in developing economies does not necessarily follow a path of long-term deterioration as did in the old industrial model. And some of you may be wondering why that is. Well, when new or developing countries industrialize, they don't have to make all the same mistakes that we did in the West when we were industrializing. Furthermore, the equipment and all the manufacturing, the machines don't burn nearly as much coal as we did during the early industrialization as well. Another interesting thing to note with sustainable development is that as countries develop more and more, they shift further and further away from industrial services from industry and manufacturing, and they shift more to a service economy. And of course, the service economy typically pollutes less than does an industrial economy. So what you see is an interesting trend. The manufacturing and the industrial side of the world economy is becoming more efficient, polluting less, and as the world develops more, we shift to services away from industry, so our amount of pollution per capita winds up declining. In the next video, I'm going to talk a little bit about, it seems obvious based on what I've discussed, why we should care about the environment, why that's important. But what I'm going to talk about in the next video are some reasons that pollution, that we would maybe forget about the importance of maintaining and respecting the environment. Looking forward to seeing you then.